It's time again for another budget handheld review. Hey guys, Taki here. It's been a while since we've taken a look at a portrait handheld, but we have a decent one here from PowKiddy of all companies. It may look a little strange, but this is one of the better budget handhelds out there today. In this video, we're going to take a deep dive look at the new PowKiddy V10. The PowKiddy V10 is powered by the immortal RK3326 SoC with 4 Cortex A35 cores clocked at 1.5 GHz. It has a Mali G31 GPU, 1 GB of DDR3L RAM, and 64 GB of SD card storage for ROMs and the OS. We also have a 3000 mAh battery, a 3.5-inch IPS display with a resolution of 480 by 320, and our operating system is ArcOS. When it comes to pricing, PowKiddy is currently selling the cheapest SKU at $39.99. This is for the 64 GB package that I have in this video. The 128 GB SKU goes for $49.99. For our first section, let's go over the stock software and the included ROMs. I've deleted some of what came with my 64 GB card, but I will go through and show a system that I didn't touch. For example, here is SFC. If I go in here, there are a ton of games, but you're not likely to find all of the big games that you want, especially from Nintendo, because a lot of these companies are afraid of legal action. It's actually kind of funny to see Mario is missing because you're not likely to find other Mario games elsewhere in this system. But this entire thing is running on ArcOS, and if we go into the settings, we can see that this build is dated from 2023. So it's pretty old, but this platform was already very mature in 2023. This OS uses Emulation Station as the front end, so if you're new to these kinds of devices, learning how to use this one will make it easier for you to migrate over to more expensive devices down the line. This is the default theme that this comes with, and it has a scrolling list on the left side that you can see. If we go into one of the systems here, you'll see that there's another list view on the left with a small area for box art and a video in the corner. Not every game will come with these assets out of the box. Usually you'd be able to scrape missing assets with Wi-Fi, but since we don't have any built-in Wi-Fi here, that's going to make things more complicated. You would need to use a dongle to get around this, but even if you did, we're missing some easy options for Wi-Fi settings in the menu. Another thing that I want to point out is that this system isn't configured in the best way right out of the box, and I can give you 2 examples of that. By default, you won't be able to control N64 because they didn't bother to remap the controls for this system. I've already done that, so it works for me, but I want to show you what you would need to do if you ended up buying this. This isn't a seamless experience like it is on other handhelds that also lack a joystick. If we press this button over here and the X button, we can get into the RA menu. And there we need to go to controls, and then we can map D-pad up, down, left, and right to the analog stick. After you do that, the D-pad will take the place of the analog stick. Admittedly, it kind of sucks to play N64 games with a D-pad, so there are not a lot of games that I would want to play like this, but you do have the option. Let's close out of this game by pressing the Quit Game hotkey, and then let's head over to Super Nintendo. To go over my next point, let's load up Super Mario RPG. And just to make it a bit easier to see what's wrong here, we're going to go ahead and go into the settings, and then we're going to turn on the FPS. Now you'll be able to see the issue that the default system has in its configuration. The scrolling background in the new game menu is kind of heavy, but it shouldn't be a big problem for this chip. As you can see, we're at 54 FPS, which is not what we want. We should be able to fix this by changing to a different default emulator. Let's exit out of the game again and head over to the emulator settings menu. And there we need to head down to Super Nintendo and change this to RA, and I'll pick the bottom option for my core. When we reload the game, you'll see that it has no problem running at 60 FPS. So to wrap this up, this is a device that you're probably going to have to do small amounts of tinkering here and there to be able to get the most out of it because the default configuration isn't ideal across the board. It seems like they've copied this from another platform, but they didn't really look into everything to make sure there weren't any glaring issues. Let's switch gears and talk about the build quality and controls, and surprisingly, this is one of the better parts of the V10. Right off the bat, you're going to notice that this shape is kind of strange, especially if we compare it to something like a Game Boy Color. It's going to feel like the proportions are out of whack, especially if you take into account that the screen will have big borders for a lot of content that you're going to be playing. But if we just ignore that, there are a lot of good things about this. First of all, let's go over what we have in terms of controls and what we don't have. On the front, we have a minus and a plus button. These are mapped to L3 and R3 for some strange reason, but they do act as hotkeys for some other things that we'll talk about in just a second. We also have a D-pad and a set of ABXY buttons below that. For the color option that I have, they've injected these buttons with 2 different colors to match the SNES aesthetic. And I do want to point out that these are all independent. It's common to see connected buttons at this price point, which provides a worse experience. If you press one button on those, you'd also end up pressing the buttons around it, but that isn't an issue here. On the bottom, you'll find the start and select buttons. On the left side, we don't have anything, and the same goes for the right. The bottom is where you'll find the single SD card slot for the ROMs in the OS, and we also have a headphone jack. There are two USB Type-C ports on the top of the V10, with one of them for charging and the other for OTG, and I'll just point out that this device does not support C2C charging over that Type-C port. Beyond that, we have a reset button and a power button. If we do a single press of that, the device will go to sleep, and this seems to be more or less a true sleep mode like your phone. We still have shoulder buttons to go over, but as you can see, we don't have any volume buttons, which is really kind of strange. I honestly don't know why they would go ahead and include these two guys, but not use any of the ample space on the sides for volume buttons. It's decisions like these that just leave me scratching my head. Because we don't have any volume buttons, we need to use hotkeys to change the volume, and it doesn't work well. To adjust the volume, we need to press the plus button, and then we need to move left or right on the D-pad. The problem is that the D-pad continues to function when you're doing this. This is probably the worst implementation of volume adjustment that I've seen thus far. On the flip side of this, we also have to use a similar combination for brightness adjustments. To do this, we need to press the plus button with D-pad up or down. As you can see, the screen gets very dark at the minimum level, so I don't think this is a device that you have to worry about disturbing anyone around you if you're going to be playing this at night in bed. That being said, it's not particularly that bright at the maximum setting. This would need to be about 20% brighter to meet the average level you'll find on other popular handhelds in this price range. That leaves us with the back, and this is where you'll find 4 digital shoulder buttons. These are molded in a way that'll give you a small shelf to rest your fingers on, and it's easy to press any of these. These are not as bad as some cheaper handhelds like the R35S and the R36S, but they're not as good as the ones in the Miu Mini or the Miu Mini Plus. The micro switches on the V10 are kind of clicky. It's really the only thing that stands out when it comes to controls. Start and select and the two hotkeys also use micro switches, but these two are louder than those. Thankfully, the rest of the buttons use conductive rubber. And I have to point out that these are a highlight of this device. These are uncharacteristically good for a PowKiddy device. I would say that the conductive rubber that they used is essentially ideal. It's very comfortable to use, and the buttons don't bottom out when you press them. The D-pad is also quite good. We'll do some testing in just a second, but I like that they rounded off the edges of the D-pad this time around. This feels great for games that require constant rolling of your thumb. When it comes to fighting games, this D-pad is awesome. It is very easy to get off combos in Third Strike, and this was honestly a surprise for me. This is how it looked the first time I booted up the device. Usually I have to get used to a device, but it felt natural here. I find this combination of buttons and membranes to be very comfortable for platforming games as well. So the controls are above average. The build quality is kind of in the same ballpark. This is uncharacteristically good build quality for PowKiddy. PowKiddy sells devices that are more than 3 times the cost of this with way worse build quality. The plastic that they're using this time around feels robust. This has a somewhat smooth finish to it, and the only thing that really stands out as a problem are those shoulder buttons. They rattle a bit, which is something that you'll usually see on cheaper devices or even more expensive ones. These don't rattle nearly as much as those, but they do have a small gap on either side that can make some noise if you're moving this around in your hands. That's really the only thing that's standing out for me based on all of the time that I've used this thus far. I don't want to knock them for it, but the unit that I have does have some minor burrs on the edges near the bottom. This is an easy fix if you have something smooth to run against them to put them back into place, and that's what I did to fix my unit. Long story short, I think they did a decent job on this, but it's really a head scratcher why their build quality is not better on more expensive devices that they sell. And now we're going to do a test of the audio speaker. We only have a mono speaker on this guy, and it's right here in the center. It's not going to be the best speaker in the world, especially for this price point. It doesn't have a lot of bass to it, and it doesn't really get all that loud, but it does have the benefit that it doesn't distort. So you got to take it for what it is. You can judge for yourself from the audio recordings in the next 2 games. I think the saving grace of this entire thing is that we do have audio out on this, and that's my preferred way to game on devices like this, especially when the device doesn't have stereo speakers. In this section, let's talk about the display, and the system that this device is the best for is GBA. Whether or not that's a compelling enough reason for you to buy this is another question. So here we have the V10, an AGS101 SP, and the new RG35XX SP. This thing has a 4x3 screen with an overlay on the bottom here, and as you can easily see, both of these guys beat out the AGS101. It's not even a contest. If it was just a contest between the AGS101 and the V10, then the V10 wins, but the V10 screen doesn't look as good as the 35XX SP. This screen is pretty much the standard quality that you can expect from the current 3.5-inch displays. They all pretty much max out the quality of this display, and I think this screen has better colors and a higher maximum brightness than the V10. If you have your heart set on GBA games, the V10 is going to give you very sharp pixels with good reproduction of pixel art in GBA games. Other things are going to be less than ideal. And I have an example here with a Super Nintendo game. This kind of thing is a minor nitpick, but I just want to explain what you're going to be trading off with this device and how you can work around some of the limitations that it has. So the first thing that I want to focus on are these stairs. As you can see, the pattern for the stairs is not even, but it's supposed to be. It kind of looks like you go up 2 stairs, then there's a small landing, then you go up 2 stairs, and so on. It's not supposed to be like that. If we go into the display options and we turn on integer scaling, you'll see that the stairs are even. That is how they're supposed to look. And we can make it a bit easier to see this by turning on the overscale option. This will overscale the entire image so it fills out the entire screen, but it'll leave enough of the picture so we can get a better look at the stairs. Let's turn that on and then back out again. And as you can see, those stairs are even. Unfortunately, you can't get a sharp picture like this with the proper scaling on this screen, but we can improve the scaling. If we go into the options and turn on RGA scaling, it's going to soften the image, but it'll fix that issue that we have with the stairs being uneven. So let's enable that and then back out from the settings. And now as you'll see, the stairs are even, but the picture is a bit softer. So it just depends on what you like. I think if you're playing a game that's kind of text heavy, then this is a good trade-off if you see any issues. I just use this game as an example because it has those 2 stairs in the intro of the game. Before moving on, let's do a quick teardown on this. With the back cover off, we can see a rather small battery for a space this big. This is kind of funny to see because I can comfortably fit one finger on either side of this cell. This is a lot of wasted space. I thought the size was wrong, but the label on the battery matches up with the specs, so I don't know what's going on. The battery uses a standard JST connector, so you could source a bigger cell for this if you wanted. The bottom of this battery is a bit warmer than I would expect, so we need to tear this down further to see what's happening. Unfortunately, the reason why it was warm is because it sits on top of the RAM. This board layout doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and I don't know why they didn't do a better job routing this PCB. This kind of thing is stupid, but the battery would sit about here, so it's getting some heat from the DDR3 RAM and a bit from the bottom of the processor. If they don't have to, I think companies should just avoid doing Ambernick engineering like this. The battery should not be a heatsink for the processor, and with better routing on this board, this would be different. Anyway, this device is easy to service and repair. I am a big fan of the conductive rubber pads that they're using. I've done way more performance testing of RK3326 than I ever wanted to do in my entire life, so we're going to skip over doing an in-depth section on performance, and I'll just merge some emulation footage with my pros and cons. If you need a deeper look at a specific system, I'll link my R35S or my R36S video down below since it has this processor. Anyway, when it comes to the pros, I picked out 4 things that I like about this device. The first is that it has above average controls. The D-pad and ABXY buttons are not only good at this price point, but I think I would be hard pressed to find a better set in any PowKiddy device that I own. The next pro for me is the shell quality. Like the controls, this is one of PowKiddy's better plastic shells. They sell devices for more than double this with way worse feeling plastic. So it's another strange thing about this budget device. Given that we have a 3x2 display, the V10 is great for GBA emulation. Finally, at $39.99, this is one of the more affordable options on the market today. On the other side, I also picked out 4 things that I don't like about the V10. The first is the lack of volume buttons. I do not understand the decision to remove dedicated volume buttons and replace them with a button combination that interferes with the game that you're playing. This was a bad design choice. The second thing that I don't like is kind of minor, but I think this thing has a lot of wasted battery space, and we could easily get a 4000 mAh battery or bigger in here. I assume this was done for cost, but the difference wouldn't be big enough for me to opt for a smaller cell. I did 1 full battery drain of GBA, and this is what I managed to get. This is actually pretty good, but you can imagine how much better it would be if we had a bigger battery in here. The third thing that I don't like is the default configuration. This won't provide you with the best pick up and play experience for every system without doing some manual tweaks like I already showed off earlier in this video. This platform and this processor are very old, so these kinds of configurations should already be set in stone for something like this. It's kind of lazy with the way that they did things on this device. Finally, this is not a handheld that does well with 4x3 content. We have settings that we can use to mitigate some of the issues with 4x3 content on this display, but nothing compares to a real 4x3 screen or even a higher resolution 3x2 panel. And if I decided against filming a review for this video, this is the pass-fail list that I would have published for the V10. When it comes to my recommendations, I think this is a solid choice for a first gaming handheld if you can answer yes to more than one of the following things. Number 1, you want a device that is good for GBA. Number 2, it's important for your device to have a good set of face buttons. Or number 3, you're on a budget and you want to get something for around $50 shipped. My big takeaway from this is that I hope PowKiddy takes some of what is good about this device and they apply it to their future handhelds. They sell stuff that is way worse than this for a lot more money, and now they have no excuse for doing that for their future devices. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see another, take a look at my review of the RG35XX Plus. It's another decent portrait handheld. Happy gaming everyone. Taki out.